During the Carter administration, Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, a national security advisor and political scientist, warned President Jimmy Carter and all state departments that everything had to be done possible within their powers to prevent African Americans and Africans throughout the diaspora from uniting with Native Africans politically, culturally, and economically. When Africans are kept divided globally, we lose our global numerical advantage and we're stripped of all hopes of defeating global white supremacy. The fact is that the white society's exploitation of Africans has provided it with an era of which it has flourished most throughout history. To allow this era to end would be directly against the interests of the white society, especially given that the white society's dependence upon Africa's natural resources is never ending. Therefore, it's within the best interest of the Western world that Africans be kept divided globally, thus allowing them to continue their ongoing exploitation and subjugation of Africans without any global African resistance, no unified resistance from Africans. To meet this objective, they started deploying many propaganda campaigns to divide we Africans globally. The white society controls the media portrayal of both African Americans and Native Africans. Therefore, both groups perceive each other through the white control media lens. This allows the white society to create negative perceptions among both of our group, which produces division beneficial to the system of white supremacy. Here's how the white propagandists turn many Native Africans against African Americans. The media images shown to Native Africans of we African Americans are those that depicts African Americans in an unflattering, buffoonery, and culturally disconnected manner. Furthermore, African Americans are being made to appear as criminals and thugs and as being part of a treacherous, frightening, and insane fringe. These images reinforces negative stereotypes about African Americans and produces fear within the minds of Native Africans regarding African Americans. It should therefore come as no surprise that many Native Africans develop negative opinions about we African Americans. As a result of these media depictions, many Native Africans come to the United States looking down at African Americans and fearing African Americans. African Americans who could very well be their blood relatives. For some Native Africans, the propaganda against African Americans is so strong that some insist that their children, upon growing up, only marries Native Africans. Many Native Africans have also given reports about being told by government immigration officials upon arriving in the U.S. to stay clear of African Americans. Now, here's how they've turned many African Americans against Native Africans. During the 1960s, African Americans had begun strongly embracing an African identity. Many started declaring our love for Africa, started wearing afros, braids, dashikis, and giving ourselves African nicknames. African Americans' allegiance towards Africa was very strong during the 1960s. White social scientists determined that African Americans had developed a romanticized view of Africa. Furthermore, that romanticized view of Africa fueled the Black Power and the Black Pride movements. They also determined that African Americans' allegiance towards Africa hindered the growth of our patriotism towards the U.S. They concluded that in order for African Americans' allegiance towards the U.S. to grow, that our allegiance towards Africa had to be eroded. To meet this objective, white propaganda designers were hired to turn Africa into a source of shame and humiliation for millions of African Americans. They achieved this feat by constantly inundating African Americans with media depictions of Africa showing only the war-torn, famine-ridden, rapidly illiterate, disease-stricken Africa. By only showing the poorest parts of Africa, this manipulated millions of African Americans to feel grateful for the enslavement of our ancestors, because the perception has become that slavery rescued us from the backwoodsness of Africa. This increased Black allegiance towards the U.S. government and dissuaded us from pursuing the reparations we're still owed. Some African Americans have been so heavily demoralized and humiliated by the white media's deplorable depictions of Africa that they'll now accept any fable that allows them to claim themselves as being anything other than African. It's why millions of African Americans now prefer to be called by the N-word rather than being called an African. This is a fact. This propaganda campaign is also why so many African Americans have embraced the false narratives that we're not Africans. Although countless millions of DNA analysis have scientifically confirmed our African identity. Psychologists call this disassociation. It's a defense mechanism that evolves to put a distance between ourselves and the white society's negative media depictions of Africa. All long-term demoralizing psychological warfare campaigns leave damages to their targeted populations. This propaganda campaign also prevents African Americans from pursuing the reparation debt that the U.S. government still owes us. This is because we've been made to perceive it as the enslavement as having benefited us. So therefore we don't pursue. We see it as a rescue mission that delivers us from the terrible place of Africa. So therefore, since we see it as a rescue mission rather than seeing it as the Holocaust that it truly was. This psychological warfare campaign breaks down African Americans' sense of Black racial heritage and allegiance towards Africa, thus meeting the ruling white elite's divide and conquer objective. The more recent propaganda campaign that's now being deployed is the one that we African Americans are not from Africa, but are instead the true Native Americans. It's totally untrue because millions of us have taken DNA analysis that have scientifically confirmed that we are, in fact, Africans. Furthermore, that false claim that we African Americans are the true indigenous Americans is also designed to create division between we and the true Native Americans. Many indigenous Americans are now understandably pushing back against the claim that we are the true Native Americans, which is create division between us. That propaganda campaign has created a profound division between African Americans and Native Americans, unlike we've ever seen in history. This is all by deliberate design. When two of the most oppressed groups in the U.S. are divided, it makes the U.S. system of white supremacy much stronger. Now returning back to the Black African Global Divide campaign. That propaganda campaign is the true reason why many Native Africans arrive in the U.S. with negative preconceptions about African Americans. And it's the same reason why many African Americans have negative preconceptions about Native Africans upon their arrival into the country. This is all possible because people are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving them certain information every so often, and you can persuade an entire generation towards an applied objective. We African Americans and we Africans throughout the entire diaspora, we must stop being easy, gullible victims of the white society's divide and rule propaganda campaigns. Welcome to the real world.